The Valanthi exploration ship moved slowly through the empty darkness. Between stars, its name was Whisper of Dawn, and it had been traveling for 300 years. The crew had changed many times. Old ones died, new ones were born, and the mission continued. Their job was simple: find new worlds, record new life, report back to the galactic. Conquered, Commander Yelthani stood on the bridge and watched the stars drift past. Her skin changed colors with her mood, as all Valanthi skin did. Right now it was a calm blue. She had seen many star systems in her 40 years of service. Most were empty, some had simple life, a few had primitive creatures that might one day become intelligent. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. The science officer, a young male named Toril, called out from his station. His voice was calm at first, then confused, then afraid. Commander, I am detecting something strange from the third planet of this yellow star. Yelthani walked over to look at his screens. What kind of strange life signs, Commander? Many life signs. How many? A few thousand, a few million. Toril's skin turned pale white. This was the color of fear, Commander. The readings must be wrong. The sensors show billions, nearly 8 billion intelligent life forms on a single planet. Yelthani felt her own skin grow pale. That is impossible. Run the scan. Again, they ran it again and again, and again the number did not change. 8 billion creatures lived on that small blue and green world. Show me the planet, Yelthani ordered. The main screen changed to show the third world. From this unremarkable yellow star, it was beautiful in a terrible way. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. Green and brown land masses held massive cities that glowed with artificial light. On the dark side, satellites circled it. Like tiny moons, ships moved between the planet and its single natural moon. What are the planet's conditions? Yelani asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Toril read from his screen. His hands were shaking. Gravity is strong, much stronger than our home world. The atmosphere contains high levels of oxygen, which is corrosive and toxic to most known species. The planet has extreme temperature variations. The poles are frozen. The middle regions can reach temperatures that would boil our blood. There is constant tectonic activity, earthquakes, volcanic eruption. The star bombards the surface with dangerous radiation. A death world. Yelthani said, Yes, Commander. Category 12, the highest possible rating. Category 12 death worlds were supposed to be empty. Nothing could live there. The conditions were too harsh, too deadly. The galactic conquered had classified over 10,000 such worlds, and none of them had ever produced intelligent life. Until now there is more. Tavel said. He pulled up new data on the screen. They have developed nuclear technology. They have split the atom, and Commander, they have used it as a weapon against themselves. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing. Nuclear weapons were the most terrible thing any species could create. Most civilizations that discovered them destroyed themselves within a few generations. It was a test that few passed. How long ago? Yelthani asked. Approximately 80 of their years. They dropped two such weapons on populated cities during a global conflict, and they survived. They did more than survive, Commander. They built thousands more. They have pointed them at each other for decades, and somehow they have not used them again. Yelani stared at the blue planet on the screen, a species that could create nuclear weapons and choose not to use them even while pointing them at each other was either incredibly wise or incredibly dangerous, perhaps both. What else do we know about them? The science team worked for hours intercepting and translating the electromagnetic signals that poured from the planet, radio waves, television broadcasts, something they called the internet. The data painted a picture that made even the bravest crew members feel sick. These creatures called themselves humans. They had been fighting wars since before they learned to write. They had killed each other with rocks, with metal blades, with guns, with bombs, with poison gas, with disease. They had committed terrible acts against their own kind, genocides that killed millions, slavery that lasted centuries, cruelty that seemed to have no end. And yet they also created beautiful things, music that made the translators struggle to find adequate words, art that captured light and emotion in ways the never seen, stories of love and sacrifice and hope. They built great monuments. They explored their own world with endless curiosity. They reached out to their moon and walked upon its surface. They were a contradiction, a species at war with itself in every possible way. Commander Talville said quietly, "There is something else you need to see." He showed her their history, not just the wars but what came after. Every disaster that should have ended them had failed. Ice ages had covered their world and they had survived. Plagues had killed half their population and they had rebuilt. Asteroids had struck their planet and wiped out most life, and their ancestors had crawled out from the ashes. Every extinction event, every catastrophe, every self-inflicted wound they had endured. They did not just survive, they came back stronger each time. How is this possible? Yeleni asked. How does anything survive on that world, let alone thrive? I do not know, Commander. They should not exist. Everything we understand about life in the universe says they should have died long ago, but they did not. They refused to die. Yelthani made her decision. She turned to the communications officer. Send a priority Omega signal to Concord Central. Mark this system as extremely dangerous. Request immediate quarantine protocols. No one is to approach this world until the council has reviewed our findings. What do we tell them? The officer asked. Yelthani looked at the blue planet one more time. 8 billion creatures who had survived everything their deadly world had thrown at them. 8 billion beings who had mastered nuclear fire and somehow not burned themselves to ash. 8 billion potential soldiers who knew nothing but struggle and survival. Tell them, she said slowly, that we have found something that terrifies me more than anything I have ever seen. Tell them we have found a species that should not exist. Tell them we have found humans. The message went out at faster than light speed. It reached Concord Central in 3 days. Within a week it had spread to every major species in the known galaxy, the Mareth, the Collective, the Dranasi, the Yulani. All of them received the data. All of them watched the recordings. All of them saw what lived on that small blue world. And all of them felt the same emotion that Yelthani had felt on her bridge. Fear. The galaxy had seen death worlders before, small groups of broken survivors clinging to life on hostile worlds. They were usually grateful for rescue, easy to integrate into galactic society. They posed no threat to anyone, but humans were different. Humans had not been broken by their world, they had conquered it, they had spread across every corner of it, they had built civilizations and destroyed them and built them again, they had touched their moon and were reaching for the stars. They were not survivors waiting to be saved, they were predators waiting to be discovered. The galactic conquered had spent millions of years building peace among the stars. They had unified thousands of species under one banner. They had ended countless wars and prevented countless more. Now they faced something new, something none of them understood. Humanity and the galaxy watched in terror. The Great Council chamber on Nexus Prime had not been this full in over 1,000 years. Representatives from every major species in the galactic conquered had gathered to discuss the discovery. The room was massive, built to hold beings of all sizes. Small creatures stood on elevated platforms, giant ones curled in specially designed spaces. Thousands of translators worked to convert every language into every other language so that all could understand. High Counselor Mithrani of the Valent stood at the central podium. Her skin shifted through colors of worry and concern as she addressed the assembly. Behind her, massive screens showed images of Earth. The blue planet hung in the darkness. Beautiful and terrible, fellow members of the conquered, she began. You have all seen the data. You have all read the reports. You understand why this emergency session was called. The question before us today is simple. What do we do about humanity? The first to speak was Ambassador Crystalline, the voice of the Morath. The Morath were beings of living crystal, ancient beyond measure. They had existed since before most species had crawled from their oceans. When Crystalline spoke, its voice rang like bells. The standard protocol for discovering a new intelligent species is clear. We are supposed to make contact. We are supposed to offer them our knowledge, our technology, our friendship. We are supposed to welcome them into the galactic community. The crystal being paused, its facets flickering with inner light. I do not believe we can follow standard protocol in this case. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Standard protocol had worked for millions of years. To abandon it was unthinkable. Explain your reasoning, High Counselor. Mithrani said, they are too dangerous. Crystalline's voice was heavy with aid and wisdom. In all my centuries of existence, I have never seen a species like this. They discovered nuclear fission, and within years they used it to destroy 2 of their own cities. 200,000 of their own people burned to ash in an instant, not by accident, by choice. The screens behind the podium changed. They showed old images in black and white, a mushroom cloud rising over a ruined city, bodies in the streets, buildings reduced to shadows. This is what they do to themselves. Crystalline continued, what will they do to us? Representative of the collective spoke. Next, the collective was a hive mind. Billions of individual creatures sharing one consciousness. Their speaker was a small insectoid being, but its voice carried the weight of countless minds. We have analyzed their communications in great detail. Their history is a cycle of endless violence. They have fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over the color of their skin and the names of their gods. They have invented weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering, poison gases that burn the lungs, diseases engineered to spread death, bombs that scatter metal Fragments through flesh, the screens, showed more images, soldiers in trenches, cities in flames, mass graves, filled with bodies, and yet the collective continued. This is not what frightens us most. The chamber fell silent. What frightens us most is their refusal to surrender. We have studied their wars. When other species face overwhelming odds, they submit. They recognize that survival requires acceptance of defeat. Humans do not. They fight to the last soldier. They fight beyond the last soldier. Their civilians take up weapons. Their children carry messages through enemy lines. They burn their own cities rather than let enemies take them. A Draenthi general, a massive four-armed warrior, covered in thick scale, stood from his seat. This is commendable. A warrior spirit is to be respected with respect. General, the collective responded, you do not understand. It is not courage that drives them. It is something deeper, something we have no word for. They would rather die standing than live. Kneeling, all of them, every single one. Of the 8 billion, the general sat back down, his scales shifting uncomfortably. High Counselor Mithrani called for the next speaker. It was a Yulani, a delicate being with wings like spun glass. The Yulani were known as healers and scholars. I have studied their biology. The Yulani said it explains much about their behavior. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them. Every day, their bodies reflect this. They can survive injuries that would kill any other species. They can lose limbs and continue fighting. Their blood clots quickly to seal wounds. Their immune systems are aggressive beyond belief. They can eat foods that would poison most beings. They can function in extreme temperatures. They can go without water for days and without food for weeks. The screens showed human athletes, soldiers, survivors, people missing arms or legs who continued to live full lives, people who had survived disasters that should have killed them. Their minds are equally resilient. The Yulani continued. They experience fear, but they can ignore it. They experience pain, but they can push through it. They have a concept they call willpower. It allows them to override their basic survival instincts to charge into danger. When every part of their brain tells them to run, madness, someone called from the assembly. That is simply madness. No, the Yulani replied, it is adaptation. Their world created them this way. It forged them in fire and death and struggle. They are what a species becomes when every single day is a fight for survival. The debate continued for hours. Species after species shared what they had learned about humanity. The picture that emerged was terrifying. Humans were social predators. They hunted in groups and showed no mercy to prey. They domesticated other creatures, breeding them over generations to serve human needs. They reshaped their own world, cutting down forests, draining oceans, moving mountains. Nothing was beyond their reach. Nothing was safe from their hunger, but they also loved. They formed bonds with each other that defied logic. They sacrificed themselves for family, for friends, for complete strangers. They created art and music and stories that explored the deepest parts of existence. They dreamed of things that did not exist and then built them into reality. They were monsters. They were saints. They were both at the same time. Finally, High Counselor Mithra called for a vote. The question is this: do we follow standard protocol and make contact with humanity, or do we establish a quarantine around their system and observe from a distance. The vote was not close. Species after species chose quarantine. The final count was 3,412. In favor of quarantine, only 7 voted. For contact, the motion passes. Mithrani announced effective immediately. The Sol system is under complete quarantine. No ship is to approach. Within 10 light years, observation. Satellites will be placed to monitor human activity. Under no circumstances is anyone to make contact with the inhabitants of Earth. She paused and looked out at the assembled representatives. Her skin had turned the gray color of deep sorrow. Let us hope this is enough. Let us hope they never find us, because if they learn that we have been watching them, that we have been afraid of them, I do not know what they will do. The assembly dissolved into smaller groups, all discussing the same thing. The humans, the Deathworlders, the species that should not exist but did, in the shadows. At the back of the chamber, a Kree ambassador watched and listened. The Kree were warriors, conquerors. They had built an empire on the edges of conquered space by taking what they wanted. The other species called them brutal. The Kree themselves practical. The ambassador did not believe the stories about humanity. Every species told tales of their own strength. Every species exaggerated their victories and minimized their defeats. These humans were probably no different, primitive creatures on a harsh world. Nothing more. The conquered was simply being cowardly as usual. The Kree would not be cowardly. The Kree would show the galaxy that there was nothing to fear from one small planet of primitives. The ambassador began composing a message to the Kree High Command. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. 40 years passed. The quarantine held. Hidden satellites watched Earth from the darkness between planets, recording everything but never interfering. The humans continued their chaotic existence, completely unaware that they were being observed. In those 40 years, humanity did exactly what the conquered feared they would do. They advanced. They built space stations. They sent probes to every planet in their system. They landed machines on asteroids and moons. They talked seriously about traveling to other stars. Each year, their technology improved. Each year, they reached a little further into the void. The observation reports grew more alarming with each passing cycle. The humans were not slowing down. If anything, they were speeding up. Conquered scientists calculated that at their current rate of advancement, humanity would develop faster than light travel within another 50 years, maybe sooner. But the quarantine remained. No one wanted to be the first to approach the Deathworlders. No one wanted to find out what would happen if humans learned. They were not alone. No one except the Kreth. War Commander Thraus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endless Fury. Behind him stretched a fleet of 300 warships. Each one was armed with enough firepower to reduce a continent to glass. The Krath had used these ships to conquer a dozen worlds. They had never lost a battle. Thrakis did not believe in fear. Fear was weakness. Fear was for lesser species who did not have the strength to take what they wanted. The conquered stories about humanity were obviously exaggerated. Primitives who had barely reached their own moon could not possibly threaten the greatest military force in the known galaxy. Status report. Thrace commanded. All ships ready. War Commander, we will exit faster than light travel in Approximately 10 minutes, the human home. World will be directly ahead, Thrakus. Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Excellent, prepare the standard conquest. Broadcast, the fleet dropped out of FTL. Space in perfect formation, Earth hung. Before them blue and green and completely defenseless, or so they thought. The broadcast went out on every frequency the Kree could detect. Attention, inhabitants of this world. I am War Commander Thraus of the Kree. Dominion, your planet and all resources within this system now belong to us. You will surrender immediately and unconditionally. Any resistance will be met with complete destruction. You have 1 of your hours to respond. Thrice leaned back in his command chair. Satisfied this would be easy. The humans would see his fleet. They would understand they were hopelessly outmatched. They would submit, and the Kree would gain access to a world rich in resources and 8 billion new slaves. The response came in 17 minutes. It was not a surrender. Unknown vessels, this is United Earth Defense Command. We do not know who you are or why you are here, but you are in our space without permission. You have threatened our planet. We do not respond well to threats. Leave now and we will consider this matter closed. Stay and you will regret it. Thraus laughed out loud. Bridge crew joined him. Regret. Primitive species with barely functional spacecraft was threatening the Kree. Dominion, they have Spirit, his second in command, said that will make the conquest more entertaining. Indeed. Target an unpopulated region of their largest continent. Show them what our weapons can do. Perhaps that will help them understand their position. 10 Kree warships moved forward. They selected a target, a vast desert on the northern part of a continent called Africa. They fired kinetic bombardment weapons, massive metal rods designed to strike the surface at incredible speed. Each one carried the force of a nuclear explosion without the radiation. Not a single rod reached the ground. Thraus watched in confusion as streaks of light rose from the planet's surface. Lasers, ground-based defense lasers that intercepted every projectile with perfect precision. That is unexpected. His second said quietly, they have defense systems we did not detect. Thraus growled, no matter, all ships move to orbital bombardment range. We will overwhelm their defenses with sheer numbers. The fleet advanced. As they did, something else unexpected happened. Hundreds of small craft began launching from Earth's surface. They rose through the atmosphere on pillars of fire. Primitive rockets burning chemical fuel. The Kree sensors identified them as combat vessels, armed, crude. They are sending their ships against us. Thraus could not believe it. They must see how outnumbered they are. This is suicide. But the human ships kept coming, more and more of them from hidden bases all over the planet. Some were small fighters, some were larger vessels. All of them were heading straight for the Kree fleet. War Commander, a sensor officer called out, I am detecting unusual readings from their ships. They are broadcasting signals to each other. Voice communications. Let me hear the bridge filled with human voices, pilots talking to each other, laughing. Some were singing songs. They did not sound like soldiers going to their deaths. They sounded excited, eager, ready. The first shots were fired. Kree weapons tore through human ships, destroying them by the dozen. But for every ship that fell, 2 more took its place, and the human ships were fighting back. Their weapons were crude, but there were so many of them. They swarmed around Kree warships, like insects, firing from every angle. "They are ramming us," someone screamed. Human pilot had flown directly into a Kree destroyer. The explosion destroyed both ships completely, and he was not alone. Other human pilots were doing the same thing when their weapons ran empty. When their ships were crippled, they aimed for the nearest enemy and accelerated. Thrakus felt something he had not felt in 50 years of warfare. He felt doubt. Boarding parties incoming. Another officer shouted, somehow human. Soldiers had crossed the void between ships. They were cutting through airlocks, forcing their way inside Kree vessels. The reports that followed were impossible to believe. Human soldiers fighting hand-toned in the corridors, killing Kree warriors twice their size, with nothing but primitive weapons and bare hands, taking hits that should have been fatal and continuing to fight. One report described a human who had been shot 3 times. He should have been dead. Instead, he grabbed the Kree soldier who shot him, broke his neck with his hands, and then continued fighting until he finally collapsed from blood loss. Even then, his last act was to activate a grenade. The battle raged for 6 days. Thrakus watched his fleet die. Ship after ship fell to the humans. Not because human technology was superior, it was not. Not because humans outnumbered them, they did not. The Kree lost because they had underestimated something they did not understand. The humans fought like nothing the Kree had ever seen. They did not surrender when wounded. They did not flee when outnumbered. They did not break when the situation seemed hopeless. They kept fighting, kept dying, kept coming. Every Kree ship destroyed took a dozen human vessels with it, but there were always more humans willing to take their place. On the 4th day, pilots began ejecting from their destroyed ships. The CFTA assumed they would float helplessly in space, easy prisoners to collect later. Instead, the humans somehow survived the vacuum long enough for rescue ships to collect them. Within hours, those same pilots were back in new spacecraft, ready to fight again. On the 5th day, the crew of a crippled human battleship refused evacuation orders. They instead steered their dying vessel directly into the heart of the Kree formation, detonating their reactor core and taking 15 warships with them. On the 6th day, Thrakus gave the order he had never given before: retreat. 88 Kreth ships survived to reach faster than light speed. 212 remained as drifting wreckage in Earth's orbit. The Kree Dominion had come with conquest in their hearts. They left with terror in their souls, and they carried that terror home with them, spreading stories of the death world and its impossible inhabitants, stories of humans who would not die, humans who would not surrender, humans who laughed as they flew into certain death, as long as they could take an enemy with them. The galaxy had been watching through the hidden satellites. Every species in the conquered saw the battle. Every species understood what it meant. The quarantine was over. Humanity knew they were not alone, and somewhere on Earth leaders were gathering. Scientists were analyzing wreckage. Soldiers were counting their dead and preparing for more. The humans were not celebrating their victory. They were asking questions. Who else was out there? Who had been watching them, and why had no one warned them about the Kree? They intended to find answers. The galactic conquered prepared for war. Every military fleet was mobilized. Colony worlds near. The Sol system were evacuated. Defense stations were constructed in a massive ring around the region of space closest to Earth. The greatest minds of a thousand species worked day and night on new weapons, new shields, new strategies. They expected the humans to come with fire and fury. They expected revenge for the quarantine, for the watching, for the KTH attack that the conquered had done nothing to prevent. They expected the Deathworlders to do what Deathworlders did: kill, destroy, conquer. They were wrong. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, a single human ship appeared at the edge of conquered space. It was small, barely larger than a transport shuttle. It carried no weapons that the sensors could detect. It moved slowly, making no aggressive maneuvers, and it was broadcasting a message on every known frequency. This is the diplomatic vessel Earth's Hope, representing the United Earth Government. We come in peace. We request permission to meet with the Galactic Conquered to discuss the recent events. Our system. We mean no harm. Please respond. The message repeated every few minutes. The ship made no attempt to advance further. It simply waited. High Counselor Mithrani received the news in her chambers. She had not slept properly since the battle. The weight of what was coming had pressed down on her every waking moment. Now she stared at the report and felt something she did not expect to feel: confusion. They sent one ship. She asked her aide. Unarmed? Yes. High Counselor, our scans show only 6 life forms aboard. The ship has minimal shielding and no offensive capability whatsoever. This must be a trick. Perhaps, or perhaps they genuinely wish to talk. Methani considered the situation. She could order the ship destroyed. She could ignore it until it went away, or she could do something that terrified her more than either of those options. She could listen to what the humans had to say, grant them permission to approach Nexus Prime. She finally said, have every weapon in the sector trained on them. If they make any suspicious move, destroy them immediately, and if they do not, then I suppose we will have to talk to them. The Earth's Hope traveled slowly through conquered space. It took 2 weeks to reach Nexus Prime. During that time, the crew made no hostile actions. They responded politely to every communication. They submitted to every scan and inspection. They behaved exactly like peaceful diplomats on a peaceful mission. The galaxy watched with held breath when the ship finally docked at Nexus Prime. A delegation of heavily armed guards was waiting. They escorted the 6 humans through the station corridors to the council chamber. Thousands of aliens lined the route, staring at the creatures they had feared for so long. The humans stared back. If they were afraid, they did not show it. The leader of the human delegation was a woman named Director Chen. She was small by human standards, with gray in her hair and lines on her face that spoke of many years and many burdens. She walked with straight posture and steady steps. Her eyes missed nothing. When she entered the council chamber, the assembled representatives fell silent. They had seen humans in recordings, in data files, in nightmares, but they had never seen one in person. Director Chen looked around the chamber without fear. She saw creatures of crystal and flesh and metal. She saw beings with wings and tentacles and forms that defied description. She saw an entire galaxy staring at her with terror in their eyes, and she smiled. Thank you for receiving us, she said, Her voice was calm and clear, the translators carried her words to every ear in the chamber. I know you are afraid of us, I understand. Why, I have seen the data you collected. I know you have been watching us for a long time. Murmurs swept through the assembly. The humans knew about the surveillance, of course they did. They had captured Kree ships, Kree data, they knew everything. You saw our wars, Director Chen continued. You saw our weapons, you saw the terrible things we have done to each other, and you decided we were too dangerous to contact. You built a fence around our system and hoped we would never find you. She paused and looked directly at High Counselor Mithrani. I am not here to punish you for that decision. I am not here for revenge. I am here because, despite everything you know about us, there is something you do not understand. And what is that? Mithrani asked. We are not monsters. The chamber erupted in noise, disbelief, anger, fear. Director Chen waited patiently until the sound died down. Yes, we fight, she said. Yes, we have committed terrible acts throughout our history, but we also choose to be better. Every generation we try again. We fall down, and we get back up. We hurt each other, and then we heal. We have crawled out of ice ages, plagues, and our own stupidity more times than we can count. She gestured toward a viewport where Earth could not be seen but was somehow felt. You called our world a death world. We call it home, and we did not survive it by being monsters. We survived it by working together, by refusing to give up on each other, even when we had every reason to. Ambassador Crystalline spoke, its voice ringing with skepticism. You destroyed 200 Kree warships. Your people flew their vessels into enemy craft with themselves still inside. You call this working together. We call it protecting our home. Director Chen replied. The Kree came to enslave us. They threatened to destroy our cities, kill our families, take everything we had built. What would you have done? The crystal being had no response. We fought because we had to fight, Director Chen said. Not because we wanted to. We take no joy in killing. Every life we took, even KTH lives, weighs on us, but we will not apologize for defending ourselves. We will not apologize for surviving. She straightened her shoulders and addressed the full assembly. I am here to make a request. We want to join your conquered. We want to trade, explore, and learn. We want to meet other species, share knowledge, build something greater than any of us could build alone. We want allies, not subjects, partners, not enemies. The collective's representative spoke. And if we refuse, Director Chen's expression did not change, then we will go home. We will continue to develop. We will continue to reach for the stars. And one day we will find you anyway. Would you rather meet us as friends who chose to welcome us, or as strangers you tried to keep out? The vote took 3 days. Species debated endlessly. Some wanted to refuse. Some wanted to accept. Some wanted to destroy the human ship and pretend this meeting had never happened. In the end, the vote passed. Humanity was admitted to the galactic conquered. It was not unanimous. 7 species voted against admission, but it was enough. Director Chen signed the treaty with a steady hand. As she did, she looked up at High Counselor Mithrani. We will prove you wrong, she said quietly. All of you. You think we are nothing but killers and destroyers. Give us time. We will show you what humans truly are. Mithrani's skin shifted through colors of uncertainty And hope in what is that, Director? Chen smiled again. This time there was warmth in it. We are the species that refuses to give up on ourselves, on each other, on anyone who stands with us. You have feared us for 40 years. Now you will learn what it means to have us as friends. She extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. After a long moment, Mithrani took it. 50 years passed. The galaxy that had once trembled at the discovery of humanity had become something new, something stronger, something that even the oldest species had never imagined possible. Humans spread across the stars like water through sand. They established colonies on worlds that other species considered too harsh, too dangerous, too difficult. They built stations in asteroid fields and moons covered in ice. They went everywhere, did everything, and somehow made it look easy. Their engineers worked with the Moreth to redesign faster than light drives. The new engines were 30% more efficient than anything that had existed before. Travel times between stars dropped dramatically. Trade routes that had taken months now took weeks. The galactic economy flourished. There, doctors studied with the Yulani healers. Together they cured 3 diseases that had been considered untreatable for thousands of years. Millions of beings who would have died were saved. Hospitals across conquered space began training human medical staff, eager to learn their strange combination of determination and creativity. Their artists created works that spread across 100 worlds, music that blended human sounds with alien instruments, paintings that showed things no single species had ever imagined, stories that explored what it meant to be alive in a universe so vast and strange. A cultural renaissance swept through the conquered, sparked by creatures who had been feared as monsters just decades before, but it was human soldiers that changed everything. The void swarm emerged from dark space without warning. They came from beyond the edge of known territory, from the black emptiness between galaxies. No one knew where they had originated. No one knew what they wanted. All anyone knew was that they consumed everything in their path. The swarm was not a single species. It was a collection of them merged together into a single hungry purpose. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply arrived at a world, stripped it of all life and resources, and moved on to the next. 6 civilizations had fallen before the conquered even learned the swarm existed. The elder races convened an emergency council. The mood was despair. The swarm was too large, too relentless, too alien. Every strategy they considered had already failed somewhere else. Every weapon they possessed had proven useless. The greatest military minds in the galaxy could not find a way to stop the advancing darkness. Then the human delegation stood. Admiral James Okonkwo was tall and scarred, with eyes that had seen too many battles and hands that had buried too many friends. He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives and spoke with quiet confidence. We will hold the line. The conquered stared at him in disbelief. The swarm had destroyed fleets of thousands. They had consumed entire armadas without slowing down, and this human was volunteering to fight them. You do not understand what you are offering, Ambassador Crystalline said. The swarm cannot be defeated by courage alone. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be frightened. They will not stop, neither will we. Admiral Okonkwo replied humanity mobilized for war, not just soldiers but scientists, engineers, doctors, and ordinary citizens. They studied every piece of data about the swarm that existed. They analyzed wreckage from destroyed ships. They captured swarm creatures and examined them. They worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, pushing themselves to the limits of human endurance. Within months they had developed new weapons, new tactics, new ways of fighting that the swarm had never encountered. The first major battle took place at a system called Korath Prime. It was a violent colony, world home to 8 million people. The swarm fleet approaching it numbered in the thousands. The defending force was mostly human, with support from a dozen other species. They were outnumbered 10-1. Admiral Yelani, the same commander who had first discovered Earth 60 years ago, watched the battle from her flagship. She had come to witness what she believed would be the beginning of the end. The humans had asked for the front lines, and the conquered had given them what they asked for. Now they would die, and the swarm would continue its advance. She was wrong. The human fleet did not fight like any force she had ever seen. They did not form defensive lines and wait for the enemy. They attacked. They split into small groups and struck from every direction at once. They targeted specific swarm ships, the ones that seemed to coordinate the others, and destroyed them with focused precision. When the swarm adapted, the humans adapted faster. When the swarm tried to overwhelm them with numbers, the humans used their numbers against them, drawing them into traps and ambushes. When individual ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews evacuated to other vessels and kept fighting. The battle lasted 3 days. At the end of it, the swarm fleet was scattered debris, and Korath Prime stood unharmed. It was the first time anyone had ever defeated the Void Swarm in a major engagement. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans had done the impossible. Again, the war continued for 5 more years. It was brutal and costly. Many died, human and alien alike, but the swarm was pushed back. System by system, battle by battle, the humans led the way, always asking for the most dangerous assignments, always finding new ways to fight. Other species began to follow their example. The Drenathi, once proud warriors who had retreated in shame from the swarm, returned to the front lines. The collective provided intelligence and coordination. The Marath developed new shield technologies. Even the peaceful Yulani sent medical ships to tend the wounded. For the first time in galactic history, every species worked together toward a single goal. The final battle took place at the edge of dark space itself. The combined fleet of the galactic conquered, led by human commanders, faced the largest swarm concentration ever recorded. The fight lasted for 2 weeks. Entire fleets were destroyed and rebuilt. Heroes rose and fell. The outcome remained uncertain until the very end. When it was over, the swarm was broken, not destroyed completely. Perhaps never that, but shattered into fragments that fled back into the darkness between galaxies. The threat was ended. Admiral Yelani stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the last of the swarm ships disappear. Human officer stood beside her, a young woman named Captain Sarah Chen, granddaughter of the director who had first spoken to the conquered 50 years ago. She was battered and exhausted, but she was smiling. "You know," Yelthani said quietly, When I first found your world, I thought you were the most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Chen laughed, and now Yalthani's skin shifted to the deep blue of profound respect, a color she had never shown to any species but her own. Now I am grateful you are on our side. Chen looked out at the stars. Somewhere among them was Earth, the death world that had given birth to her people, the planet that had forged them in fire and struggle and made them what they were. We always were on your side, she said. You just did not know it yet. The galaxy had feared humanity for good reason. They were dangerous, they were unpredictable, they were capable of terrible things, but they were also capable of great things, of sacrifice and courage and love, of standing against the darkness when everyone else had given up, of refusing to surrender. No matter the odds, the galactic conquered had spent millions of years building peace among the stars. They had done it by avoiding conflict, by finding compromise, by hoping that threats would simply go away if ignored long enough. Humanity had shown them another way. Sometimes peace had to be fought for. Sometimes the darkness had to be faced head-on. Sometimes the only way to protect what you loved was to stand in front of it and say no. The galaxy would never be the same, but perhaps that was not a bad thing. Perhaps it was exactly what they had needed all along. On Nexus Prime, a monument was built. It showed humans and aliens standing together, facing outward toward the unknown. The inscription at its base was simple: the Deathworlders who became guardians, the monsters who became friends, the humans who taught us all to hope. And somewhere in the vastness of space, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, 8 billion humans looked up at the night sky and smiled. They were not alone anymore. They never had been.